So, here to join us for our next panel, all about the Hyperport of the future. It is my pleasure to introduce CEO of Hyperloop TT, Andreas de Leon. Hello, Andreas.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Mucho gusto. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to be here.
Super. Also joining us, CEO and founder of Mormedi, Jaime Moreno. Hello, Jaime.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Super. Thank you for joining us
Thanks
today.
for inviting me.
And finally, we also have associate partner at Hamburg Port Consulting, Frank Buser. Thank you for joining us, Frank.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me here in Barcelona.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And everyone, a quick reminder, as in our previous sessions, we want you to be part of our conversation here in the studio. So please do share your questions, your comments, your controversial opinions. They are all very welcome, please, on the smartport.tv chat. And I will make sure that I put as many of them as I possibly can to our guests today. So, first of all, I think it's a good idea that we meet our experts. So, Frank, I'll come to you first of all. Tell us just a little bit about your role in Hamburg, please.
Yeah, so I'm with the HHLA, with the Hamburg Port Operating Company, and I'm working there as a operational consultant for terminal operations, and that's why I joined 3 years ago the HyperPort project, where HHLA, as a major port operator in Hamburg, is looking for new opportunities in transporting cargo to the hinterland.
So tell me about, obviously we're going to be talking about Hyperport, that opportunity today. What are the other kind of projects, other areas in which you work in your role in Hamburg?
Yeah, so it's very typical that we as port consultants, we consult other ports all around the globe to transfer our knowledge and experience that we gained in Hamburg to other ports. We are also having projects in artificial intelligence for port operations. We have funded projects for green, sustainable transport inside the port and terminal operations. So quite a range of interesting things using artificial intelligence to recognize damaged containers and all this nitty-gritty stuff that we have in the port.
So very much at the forefront of innovation, which of course is what we're talking about here today. Thank you very much, Frank. We'll come back in just a moment to you. Andreas, tell us a bit about your background with Hyperloop TT.
Well, I've been with the company more than 6 years. I started as CEO of the company, and 2 years ago we decided that the company was in a completely different level. And because my previous experience and my previous background managing industrial corporations around the world, and at the beginning of my career working in the construction business too and infrastructure business, we thought that was a good idea that I become the CEO. And since that I've been for the last 2 years carrying the company and trying to arrive to the point that we want to arrive.
And what is that point? You talk about how the company's reorganized, been on a journey, you've changed your role there and you're orienting yourself in this direction to this destination. What is that destination?
Well, I think that when we started was everything about designing the technology. Now the technology is ready, so everything is about execution. Okay, right. So basically, of course, there will be challenge in the execution, but the challenges are completely different, than when you are developing. Also, we went from a company. We were the first company that was formed to develop the Hyperloop. Hyperloop TT was formed in 2013. And we did it in a very different way. We did it using crowdsourcing. What does it mean? People working in exchange of equity. Today we have more than 800 people around the world. We have more than 50 companies collaborating with us. And we have, of course, changed a little bit our business model to allow our partners to work with us and to help us to arrive at the point that we are, that basically is we are ready for implementing, and for doing our first commercial prototype and showing it to the world.
Ready for implementation. Very exciting. We'll be asking more about that in a few moments' time, but for now, Thank you very much indeed, Andreas. Finally, Jaime, tell me a bit about Mormedi and the area in which it typically operates.
Well, I founded Mormedi 23 years ago, and we are a design strategy and product innovation firm. And today, we work, I would say, all over the world. 70% of our income is coming from outside Spain. And 50% of our activities are on mobility, from aircraft interiors, high-speed trains, metros, and Hyperloop.
Okay, so a lot of background in the mobility space.
Yes.
And just talk to me about some of the other kinds of projects. You mentioned aircraft interiors, for example. Are these new designs? Are these new areas, new innovations that you're working in, or are you trying to improve existing designs and try and find new efficiencies, for example?
I would say both. In some cases, it's like a blue sky project. We need to start with a, white piece of paper, and in others we have some constraints. So we are working. One of our first projects with for the aircraft industry was the A380X.
Oh yeah.
That was converted into the A380, and at that moment was like how to recreate a new interior with a completely new fuselage that was not existing before. No. But we have also been working in autonomous vehicles, and as I said, more traditional projects could be metros or commuter trains.
Okay. Well, sounds like a perfect set of skills for the conversation that we're going to be having today. Thank you very much indeed. Before we embark on our first round of questions, how about we take a look at a short film that shows us how the Hyperport of the future could look.
Introducing a new era in cargo transportation. Efficient and autonomous Hyperloop integrated ports, capable of airplane speeds at freight costs. Moving containers hundreds of kilometers in minutes instead of hours with zero emissions. Drastically reducing port congestion, pollution, and footprint. Reclaiming valuable waterfront property and moving ports inland. Resistant to all weather conditions. Transporting 2,800 containers a day on a single line system. A fully connected, sustainable system for balanced logistics. Revolutionizing cross-continental commerce. Welcome to a new era of sustainability, speed, and reliability. Welcome to the HyperPort.
Welcome to the Hyperport and welcome back to our conversation all about the Hyperport. That's a very exciting film. I got the goosebumps while I was watching it. A lot of work went into that. Andres, I want to come to you first of all. I want to take a step back. Hyperloop technology as a whole. Give us a bit of a primer about it, because we've talked about some of the speeds, but where does it come from and how does it work?
Okay, so look, imagine a capsule. We generate around the capsule a low pressure environment between 10 Pascal and 100 Pascal. Because we are in a low pressure environment, we don't have friction. So it's like an airplane going at high altitude. And what do? We propel the capsule with a linear synchronous motor. And then we, especially in Hyperloop TT, we developed a technology that was coming from the Lawrence Livermore lab in the United States that is called passive magnetic levitation. What does it mean? That you don't need to electrify the track, at the contrary of the maglev, to levitate. Okay, so you only need to electrify the track in the areas where you need to do propulsion. So all these elements put it together makes an infrastructure that is very simple, it's very efficient from the point of view of the use of the energy, and very sustainable because we put solar panels on top. And the most important thing is very safe, because you are in a closed environment, you control the process, you control the output and everything. So, and basically that is Hyperloop technology, okay?
So, very fast because of the reduction of friction, because you're in a vacuum container, and because of the the tracks, the magnetic, and you mentioned maglev there, and I've traveled on that fast maglev train in Shanghai and so on, but you've got a technology that builds on that. Because of the reduction in friction, you're able to move very, very quickly indeed. What are the benefits here? I mean, we talk about speed, obviously, and in the introduction we talked about how the speeds we're talking about faster than commercial airliners and so on. But what are the other benefits that make Hyperloop technology an exciting prospect for 21st century mobility?
Well, look, I think that everybody talks about the speed, but the speed is not the most important part of the equation. Okay, speed is important. Okay, because of course we can change the way that we live. We can live 300 kilometers away of the city center and going to work every day. We also can cover almost all continental distance, you know, in 3 hours between city center to city center. So we stop that kind of psychological limit of the high-speed rail, no? That you can go from Madrid to Barcelona in the rail, but if you are going to do Madrid-Paris, you always take the plane. No?
Yep.
But the most important factors is not that. From the beginning, we wanted to create a mode of transport that was efficient, okay, economically viable, and sustainable. And these are the most important things. We have demonstrated in our Great Lakes feasibility study that we have a ratio of benefit cost of 2.4 against comparable modes of transport that has 1.2. We have a payback period of 30 years instead of 100 years, you know, for high-speed rail and things like that. And even more important than that, we are fully sustainable in operations. Okay, we are CO2 neutral in operations. Why? Because we have reduced drastically the consumption of energy because there is no friction, and also the levitation doesn't need to electrify the track. It's passive magnetic levitation, and on top of that, we put solar panels in the right of way. So we generate more energy that we consume, between 5 to 15%. So basically, I'm trying to summarize: speed, financial viability of the projects that doesn't rely in public subsidies or in taxpayers, okay, and sustainability. That are the 3 main pillars of our Hyperloop TT system.
It's a very compelling argument, Andres. Thank you very much for that. We'll come back to some of those arguments in a few moments' time. If you have any questions on the Hyperloop technology and the benefits, how it works, then please do put them in the smartports.tv chat, and I'll make sure I share them with our panel later on. Jaime, I want to come to you next of all, because we've spoken in general about Hyperloop technology there as it applies generally to passengers, but when it comes specifically to designing for freight, for cargo, there are some additional challenges there. So talk to me about how you approach this project with Hamburg and with Hyperloop TPT to turn this into something that could be practical, feasible for carriage of freight.
Well, the first thing when the Hyperloop approach us is try to understand what I would say the whole ecosystem. So not just moving the container from A to B, but how the container would come to the capsule. And at the beginning, we explored different ways. We were thinking of why, first of all, can we use the same tube as we use in passengers? But we realized that to use actual containers, it would not fit in an actual. So the tube for freight is bigger. And we realized that we had to use the containers. You could not change the whole wall. I mean, you will have a lot of companies against doing heavy investment to change the containers. No? The second thing is to load it. So we had deep conversations with Hyperloop and about what was the best way to load it. At the beginning, we were thinking of loading it from the back, from the side. But after some conversation and after Hamburg got on board, they said it has to be from the top. I mean, there's no way that we can do it. So we have to rethink the whole capsule and see how we can open it from the upper part and use cranes to I mean, basically load the capsule. So. And then once the port got involved, Hamburg port, we start thinking about how those cranes should be and how the whole system should be. And that's how we came out with what you show on the video. No?
Yes, and it looks very impressive, obviously, but those shiny product videos always are. But we saw very clearly the crane system loading the containers onto the top of the train. And these are standard containers, 20, 40, half full length containers, which is very important for integration with existing ports as well. Talk to me about the vacuum part of this, because we spoke about the the tubes travel through this vacuum tube to reduce friction. Does that present any additional challenges when you're moving freight, for example?
Well, I mean, as we went through the process at the beginning, we even have some options that it was like a skate and the container was outside. But we realized that due to technical constraints, and we got all the feedback from the Hyperloop engineering team, we realized that it was not possible, that we had to put the container inside a capsule. No? I mean, maybe Andres could add some additional information on this. No?
Yeah, far away. So again, how do we make this practical for moving these large containers?
Well, I think that, first of all, as Jaime was saying, we had different discussions, and at the beginning we analyzed all kind of opportunities and all kind of possibilities. And at the end we did trade-off studies, and we decided that the best, in order to be sure that the vacuum environment was not going to affect to the goods, was to put it in the capsule. No? And of course we have the huge impact coming from our very pragmatic and technical engineers from Germany, from HyperPort, that help us a lot to put our dreams a little bit on earth, and to be very, and to have a good balance between what is the best, and what is the excellence, and we find these trade-offs, and we arrive to the system that today we are showing to the world. That the most important thing is that the system is possible to implement, and is possible to implement today. The technology is there.
Always a balance, of course. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Frank, I want to come to you next, because we've been talking about the technology, we're talking about the design, but in terms of implementing this potential solution into a real-world port, talk to me about your involvement in this project and how you see this kind of implementation working in Hamburg.
Yeah, so what Hamburg and HHLA and we as a port can provide to this project is really the experience of cargo handling. So we are doing this for 130 years. Port of Hamburg is existing for 800 years. But so this is what we really can provide. So we have Andres with his team, with all these technologies. We have the Momedi team with all the design, and we are really looking for new opportunities to transport the cargo to and from the port. And also, honestly, looking for new business opportunities for port operator, as we see that port volumes are slightly growing, but not tremendously. And we are honestly looking for other opportunities. And when Andres was talking about the 3 pillars of this project, that was really what the Hamburg Hanseatic merchant guys, we were convinced, saying, okay, so we have sustainability, which is very important, and developing the ports. We have the viability, which is actually one of the most important things. Yeah. And we were very happy having these partners talking about viability in the very first step, and not talking about technology only. And and this is what we really bring into the projects, also horizontal transport, how to bring the container, and this is what we do in Hamburg. Yeah. This is why the project is about containers and not something else. So how to get the standard container, as you said, into the tube. No extra handling, no packing, stripping, packing, nothing. Yep. No extra packages or whatever. And we researched on that, and at some points when I see this video, it sounds obvious what we invented there, but having all these engineers around and these teams, what is possible, at least discussing the mechanism of the door, took us, I don't know, several workshops. There are several opportunities to open this vehicle, this capsule. Yeah. It was impressive. Yeah.
A few months.
A few months, yeah.
3 teams working for more than 2 years. One team very focused on engineering, one team very focused on operations, and one team very focused on commercial, Yep. On the business cases and the user cases. So I think that is a very good example of collaboration, and the results, as Frank was saying, now you see the video and you say, okay, logical. Why we have cranes? Let's put it from the top. But a lot of discussions, to arrive there.
If that's the case, I find with all the very best ideas, you look at them, you get them straight away, you go, oh, it's very simple. Why did it take you 3 years to come up with that? One of the things, though, is that with transportation, you're moving goods or people from one place to another. And obviously, we can talk about how the HyperPort technology fits into the Hamburg port and what makes Hamburg a good place to be, doing a feasibility and viability study on this. But why Hamburg, and where do you see the goods being moved to, and how does that change or modify the viability, feasibility conversation?
Yeah, so we see, so why Hamburg? It's a huge source of cargo, of course. Port of Hamburg is an innovative port looking for opportunities. And honestly, we started with this project saying, okay, could this be a solution for Hamburg? So this is a viable solution. Can we reduce truck traffic? Can we enhance or have another transport mode in addition to rail? And how can we really create and enhance our unique selling proposition in Hamburg? So Hamburg is a really strong rail port, so we are handling a lot of rail cargo, and we see that this really sticks all the time. Even in the crisis, the rail volume sticks to the port. So if you have a good hinterland connection, this is one unique selling point, and we wanted to improve that, and we are improving this. And while discussing this, we also came to the solution saying, okay, yeah, why not thinking about other business opportunities? So using it as a solution for Hamburg, but also improving or inventing something which can be built all over the globe. So, and then having the Port of Hamburg together with these nice teams and having the idea about this and selling it, to say it simple. Yeah, and this also fits into all the other things that I mentioned in the introduction, that we are really looking for other opportunities, like as we are using drones use drones in the port for inspection of cranes, and using new technology and broadening our business cases.
Gentlemen, you've painted a beautiful vision of what the port and what mobility of the future could look like. I want to talk now about the challenges, however, because as we all know, with disruption, there is change, and with change, there is resistance. Andres, you've talked about this technology all over the world, a number of different forums. What are the main concerns? What are the main challenges that you're faced with, that people come to you with on panels such as this? And what are your responses to those?
Okay. Well, the challenge has changed drastically through the journey of the company. At the beginning, I still remember when people was putting in question if technologically this was viable, and we had crazy videos in internet made by people that didn't have a clue about what was the Hyperloop concept, talking about crazy scenarios and all of that. We went through that, and we were able to demonstrate, that the technology is possible, that is feasible, that there is this opportunity there. And then we had other moments where basically we were really, really worried about adoption, about regulations. The regulations was a key point, and also the adoptions of the governments. I have to say that 2 years later, I'm much more convinced that that's not going to be a problem anymore, okay? Because, Hyperloop has been named in the recently passed infrastructure bill in the US, was named in the next generation Green Deal of Timmermans, in the Timmermans document in the EU. We are working with DG Move in EU and with DOT, Department of Transportation in US, to develop all the regulatory environment. But of course it's still a challenge, But we believe that in 2-3 years we can have a complete regulatory environment for the Hyperloop. So now the biggest challenge at the end is finding the customers, especially for HyperPort. It's about who is the one that really wants to disrupt first, and finding the on this I'm a little bit critical sometimes. Everybody's talking about sustainability. Everybody's talking about the obligation of the big banks and the big investors in the world to invest in sustainability, but I don't think that it's happening enough. I really think that if we want to fight climate change, I don't believe that the public policies are going to change that. It's going to be innovation, technology, and companies, that can really, really change this, like has been demonstrated in the pandemic, where, the private sector helping to the public sector has solved a lot of the problems, So I think that it's time for the private sector to really help us, And I'm going to say one thing that I heard from one guy curiously, a German guy from the Ministry of Transport in Germany saying, look, we don't need public subsidies, we need contracts,
Right.
SpaceX developed all his technology based on contracts with NASA, not in public subsidies. So, we really need the ports operators, and in the passenger side, the big infrastructure operators of the world, betting on the Hyperloop and taking the challenge and helping us to do it. We cannot do it alone. We need to do it together.
Is one of the challenges, though, Andres, that typically administrations, governments have quite short-term views, that they're looking sometimes at investing as far as the next electoral term because the investments they make will reflect well on them. Whereas the technology, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that you're talking about with Hyperloop and with HyperPort is a bit further away. Is it, or at least that's the perception of it. Do you think that plays into it?
I think that could place, but being completely honest, with the pandemic, that has changed. I think that the governments have understood now the need of sustainable infrastructure. So I have to be, to be frank, I have to be fair. To be fair to them, and say that, as I was explaining before, they have really endorsed the concept. So I really think that now it's more about building the first. Who want to build the first? Who is going to be the country? Or who is going to be the port in case of HyperPort, or who is going to be the city in case of Hyperloop, that is going to build the first. And for that, being also fully honest, we have been working very, very hard. We have different projects around the world that we are working, and we are pushing on parallel because we cannot bet only on one option. But we are still in that process, to really being able to say, okay, we've got the money, we've got the land, we've got everything, to build the first. And we have a possibility that we discovered, to the world a long time ago in Abu Dhabi, but also with the pandemic, there has been other opportunities around the world that has come to this.
Thank you very much. Frank, I want to come to you next because we've been talking about some of the challenges, regulatory challenges and so on. In your role, you embrace innovation. I can see that from how you talk about it. However, getting the rest of a city, a company to embrace innovation can sometimes be a struggle. So while you are exploring the feasibility of this HyperPort concept,
right.
How have you gone about persuading, convincing other stakeholders in Hamburg that this is a good idea and for them to see beyond the short term and look at the potential long-term benefits?
Yeah, but starting from the very narrow view from a port operator, so talking to port operators saying we have this solution here, we can we can load your container in the system. The operator says, how can I integrate it in my existing terminal? So I have everything here, I invested billions, and now you came around. And so there was a lot of work we did, and we convinced, or we will convince everybody to, with our concept, saying, yeah, but it's easily to integrate because it's a track that is there. You can use your existing cranes, even if we see there's nice cranes, designed cranes. You can also use your existing cranes. So we have also some virtual reality demonstrator. We have developed that. And in this demonstrator, for example, you see existing cranes that are currently used for rail operation, for example. And you can place these HyperPort beside the rail tracks and use the existing crane to put the container in there. Yep. So this is nice. And then it's actually, as Andres said, the concerns have really changed, and with all the discussion about lack of truck drivers, this sustainability, as all topics that are longer lasting than 4 or 5 years of a legislation period. So, and my impression is that everybody's aware of that and that everybody's looking for solution. And of course, if you want to connect a port to a Hyperloop system, you need some infrastructure to go somewhere. And but I think from the technology point of view, we have different opportunities to go in these urban areas, to go by piles, to go underground, whatever. But you need we go over a street or we go over a rail or something. It's not that space consuming as you might expect. So you can use already land that is currently used for other infrastructure and hence this. So so these are the two major concerns,
Yeah.
integration and connectivity. How can I solve this? And we have worked on that a lot, and we really can convince the people and do. So we had a exhibition 4 weeks ago in Hamburg, talking 1 week on our booth about HyperPort. And this was a very nice experience because, of course, if you prepare for such a conference or such an exhibition, you will see all these discussions and you see all these questions. But many people understand the system, see the advantages of sustainability, but because once it's built, it's the OPEX, the operational expenses are so low because we produce more energy than we use, and that is really the long-lasting argument from my personal view. Having this solution, once we have it, it will run for the next 50 years and produce more energy.
Again, very, very convincing arguments, and the point that you make about the role that the pandemic maybe have played in this conversation, truck drivers, the supply chain challenges that we're facing, and in Europe certainly, is Christmas going to be cancelled because presents won't be able to make their way in? These, whether they're real or not, and the truck driver shortage certainly is, but these play on the conscience of the public, but also administration as well, which maybe will force them into action or encourage them into action, which opens the door for conversations like we're having here today. Please do keep your questions coming in. I can see some great questions already on the smartports.tv chat. I'll be putting those to our guests in just a few moments' time. Jaime, I want to come to you very quickly, though, and just talk about some more of the engineering challenges. And we've spoke about the cranes, getting those containers onto the capsules, and whenever you are handing off between one mode of transport and another, there's always friction, potential pain points. Are there any other engineering challenges that you've had to overcome, that you've had to address, that have been particularly challenging or interesting, or is that getting cargo on and off being the main challenge you've faced?
Well, I think one of the challenges as we're working in the new tube section is optimization of the space, no? Because how we can make this tube, even if it's bigger than the passenger one, how it could be as small as possible, no? So optimization of the whole space to bring the container in, no? And the second one, the second biggest challenge, as I was saying before, was loading, because I think that sometimes, the ports are quite windy, and when it comes down, the container can, so trying to design properly those opening system and that it's working well, I think it was a challenge.
Super stuff. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to crack open some of the questions that you've been asking. Thank you so much for all of these. First question I've got here is, we've seen in the United States, United Kingdom and Europe of the lack of capacity inland for container freight. How transformative can HyperPort be to move containers in a different way? Andres, I'll come to you first of all. How transformative is this technology when you are addressing potential stakeholders for the first time? I know you've been sharing your pitch here today, but in a sentence or in a paragraph, talk to me about the transformational potential here.
Well, I think that it's huge, no? We analyze different, as I say before, we had a commercial team that analyzed different options, no? I think that the first option that is obvious, is moving the port inland, and connecting with the seaport, so you reduce the operations in the seaport, you reduce the space that you need, you solve the problem of congestions of trucks going in the center of the cities, you reduce noise, reduce pollution, and all of that. And then, of course, when we were analyzing this, and the commercial team that was led by Frank, was analyzing this, we were saying, okay, look, if I'm going to move containers 50 kilometers inland, why I don't move it like 300 kilometers, and I put it in the center of the city, in the center of the countries, in the big logistic centers, no? So that was, and that changed completely, the way that we are thinking, because again, take truck drivers out of the roads, trucks out of the roads, reduce pollution, and again, no? And finally, of course, the big disruption, no? The big disruption is, imagine if we are able, what we call the land bridge. Imagine if we are able to move containers from Shanghai to the center of Europe in hours, instead of weeks. that changed completely, you know, the way that we are thinking today in container transportation. Okay, so, but again, I think that the capability of disruption of this technology is very big. But we also have to be very realistic, and we need to do feasibility studies in the different scenarios, because you know, you are not going to change everything now from one day to the other, you know, and there will be scenarios, you know, where the demand justify an Hyperloop and HyperPort system, and there will be scenarios where the justification is more difficult, you know, so we need to analyze case by case. But the capacity of disruption is huge. You know?
On that capacity point, Frank, I want to come to you on this. 2,800 containers per day we were talking about in the introduction and in the film. What proportion of the container throughput through your port is that? I mean, this isn't going alone to replace your other modes of transport for containers, is it?
That's right, and that was always the idea. It's not about replacing trucking and rail, but it's really looking on certain cargo, actually, to be transported by this high-speed system. And you need the trucks, of course, for local transport. So, and as we have learned, HyperPort is for long distances. It's not something to supply cities around Hamburg, cities around Barcelona, but it's about going 300, 400 kilometers. So, and this is really something we can do, let's say, 30% of a port, 40% of a port volume. Hinterland volume always depends on how much transit cargo is there in a container port, but this is what we can do and what we can solve there. And the interesting view or the interesting aspect for a port is that you can integrate these 400 kilometers off-dock depot into your operations, because you have the speed. You have the speed of 600 kilometers or even more if you like. So, and you can say, okay, I'm just loading a vessel here, but my container is still 300 kilometers away. Oh, it will be here in 20 minutes. So this is something totally new. So we are talking about off-dock depots for 20 years. Ports are congested, you have space issues in every port almost, and then what is it about growing? No, not possible, so we need an off-dock depot. Why not you putting every container on a train and moving it to an off-dock depot? So, and this is additional handling, additional costs, and so on. With Hyperloop, the functions of such off-dock depots is you have a higher variety of functions, and the transportation could be even more sustainable and cheaper, because all extra move for a container costs extra, and this has to be reduced as currently the container business is very much cost focused.
Indeed. And you mentioned, you know, potentially 30 to 40% of your throughput there in Hamburg, but depending on your destinations, that might be a substantially larger volume of the destination throughput, which is exciting too. Thank you very much indeed if that was your question. One thing I want to come to you on, Jaime, is about the practicalities here, because when we're looking at traditional rail travel or road travel, we have two tracks, at least two tracks, one coming in, one going out, or one for failover, for example, in case there happens to be a blockage on one of them. How have those practicalities played into the design for what we've been looking at for Hamburg, in terms of how do we make sure there is operational resilience in case we do have a breakdown on one of the tubes or one of the carriages? What kind of conversations have you had with the team around making sure that this is fit for purpose and fit for production, not just the concept?
Well, as Andres was saying at the beginning, I think from the engineer perspective or technical perspective, today there's no issue that the technology, it could work. I mean, we need to build a prototype to validate that, no? But of course, in a logistics scenario, you need reassurance. You need to think about alternatives of what happens if something collapse or move, no? I would say this is an issue, but I just return it to a question to you. If you look at high-speed trains, how often a high-speed train got stopped in the middle of the rail? One in maybe 1,000 times or 10,000 times. and it was most of the time was due to the weather conditions.
Yeah.
Here, so I think you come also to aircraft industry or airline industry. I mean, I think the technology is really feasible and reliable.
Okay.
Of course, maybe there's 1% of uncertainty, but it's much more reliable than a truck that could get a flat tire and crash.
Yeah.
Or a truck that could get into a snowstorm and get in the middle of the road, no? So I don't have any doubt about the reliability of the system, no? But what I think is that the future of logistics is multimodal. And as what Frank was saying, I mean, this is not the unique way. This is the best way to move certain distances. But on top of that, you will also have autonomous trucks that will probably come in 5-10 years' time.
Yep.
And you will have other systems that will complement it.
Super. Thank you very much indeed. Just a time for another few more of your questions here. Question here. Thomas de la Vega, thank you very much, Thomas, is asking, how can you manage dangerous goods inside containers with Hyperloop? I think about the Eurotunnel between London, Paris, Brussels, wherever, and about you're not allowed to travel with certain types of vehicle, with certain types of fuel tank, for example. Do you see there being limitations with regards to dangerous goods? Maybe that's what Thomas is getting at, or flammable goods inside these containers? Frank?
I don't see any issues there. So we can transport, from a technology point of view, we can transport dangerous goods. And if flammable, so we are talking about extinguishing systems in the capsule. And so in the worst case, that's what I always say, in the very worst case, we just open the capsule and in vacuum it does burn. So, but this is more a joke. So this is possible. There's more a challenge in handling liquid cargo. So when it comes to liquid cargo, and then of course, especially the tanks, they are constructed so that you do not have the movements of the liquids. But this is something we are more concerned about, saying, okay, how can we handle this? Although we always have in mind that the acceleration of a capsule, for example, should not be stronger than with a truck or with a rail. So because we have this container, and we know that this container can cover a emergency brake of a train and can cover an emergency brake of a truck. And so these are the prerequisites that we had when constructing this and working on the technology. So it's there are actually, from a technology point, no problems to transport dangerous goods. It's then in the end more about a permission when you were thinking even today, transport of explosives.
Yes.
This is, you need certain permissions, and you have certain trucking companies doing only this. And I think on rail it's very rare. So this is more a permission issue. Okay. It's not from a technology point of view, it's possible.
Yeah, I would like to add something here. You know, I think that Jaime and Frank, they have explained a little bit this, no? But you know, if you think in Hyperloop from the point of view of safety, it's much more safer by definition, by design. And let me explain this. You are in a controlled environment. You are immune to weather. Weather is a big factor of accidents, you know, today in the roads, in the rails, in all the systems. No? You have no fuel propulsion, you know, so it's electric propulsion, so it's much that. You are fully autonomous, you know, that's really important. So you don't rely on, you know, so you don't have problems, you know, with human errors or human mistakes. No? So we used to say in manufacturing, no, if you control the process, you control the output, no. And here you are controlling completely the opposite. You are in a completely controlled environment. Okay. There is challenge, yeah, of course, you know, and we did with TÜV a completely regulatory guideline based on safety and all of that, you know. But from a safe point of view, by design, by definition, it's that. And then we have been lucky because we have started to develop this system in 21st century. So of course you have smart sensors embedded in the capsule, you have stud-to-head monitoring infrastructure, a lot of things, because you don't have kilometers and kilometers of legacy infrastructure, you know, there, you know, so. But, you know, that's our situation.
Well, A confident answer to your question, Thomas. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to address the final question now to all of you, because it's actually the final question that I was going to ask. So happy coincidence there. At what point could we realistically see a HyperPort system in place at, for example, the port of Hamburg? And I will just build on that question to say, what next? What next with this project? What next with the technologies that you're working on? And to this viewer's question, how far away do you think we are from seeing Hyperloop, HyperPort technology in place, giving the benefits that you speak of? Andreas?
Well, I think that definitely, we are talking about years, not decades, okay? First of all, okay? And when I'm saying we are talking about years, we have to understand, especially in HyperPort, we are in the phase of commercialization. We are starting to talk with different ports around the world. It's not only the possibility to implement it in Hamburg, it's the possibility to implement it in any other ports of the world. So we are as far as somebody taking the decision, to do it. Okay. So, but I don't think that it's going to take a long time. I really think that there is a general consensus that HyperPort could have some implementation very, very soon. And of course, I don't want to give a date or a year right now, because it would be stupid. But I think that we are going to be looking on this very soon. Because what we presented in ITS and all the job that we have been doing now promoting this is having a lot of acceptance, from all different ports around the world.
Thank you very much indeed. Again, a confident for the future answer. Frank, I'll come to you next. What are the next steps on this project that we've been speaking about today from where you sit?
Yeah, so next steps are really diving into the market, understanding volumes of cargo, types of cargo, what is the transport industry willing to pay. So as I said, containerization and container industry is very much cost focused. So we have researched a lot. As we are working as port consultants all over the globe, we have some ideas about transport rates, transport costs all over the place. But it's now really involving potential stakeholders, potential users of the system. Then this is very important for our commercial system. Getting a clearer idea, is it who will operate infrastructure, who will operate the vehicle, who will operate the port. So these are all different roles. Will we do this all, or will there be others? And will there be huge forwarding companies owning capsules and so on? And so this is very important for us to understand and to calibrate our system. And then, of course, it's about proving that it's working, having a test track somewhere, or in the best case, test track or test HyperPort. And then it might be in Hamburg. We, as a team, are happy to have it all over the world. So it's not really stick to Hamburg, but if we also contribute it at other places. And then finally, having our larger infrastructure somewhere. But I think understanding more and getting more involved with the industry, test track, finalization, that is it.
Thank you, Frank. And Chemi, finally, in terms of the design, in terms of where your work continues, really, we've spoken about the port and we've seen this beautiful film that you've helped to create of how this could look. In terms of the overall infrastructure, what do you see as needing to happen next to enable a full-blown implementation, or at least a working prototype of the Hyperloop HyperPort technology?
Well, as Andres was saying before, I think they need a contract. They need a company or a set of companies that they would do the investment to build a prototype. What you see here is a concept quite refined. But the next step would be design engineering and refine it to build a final prototype, and then just manufacturing.
Right. So we need some contracts, we need some commitment. We need you to get in touch with these gentlemen here and continue that conversation. Listen, I'm afraid our conversation is over today. Just like the Hyperloop, it's gone very quickly indeed. But listen, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Andres, Frank, and Jaime. And I look forward to chatting, well, who knows, maybe this time next year, and we'll see where the Hyperport of the future has taken us. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much, David.